What I'm going to talk about tonight is kind of related to we have in the dojo these challenges of the week. And this week's challenge for your mind is a very fun yet difficult one, as they all are. It is to recognize when you have a negative thought and to immediately practice having 3 positive thoughts. And on the one hand, this is very simple and almost childlike. It's like, I'm just going to think happy thoughts all the time. And on the other hand, that is very challenging, because to recognize the thoughts that you're having, being able to be present to them and recognize if it's the kind of thought that you want to have or it's the kind of thought you want to let go of. And this is part of what we're doing in meditation. But there's this side of it which is very scientific and well studied. So when the scientists who studied this, and I don't know who they were, but I read a couple of articles about this, found that human beings generally have about 3 times as many negative thoughts as positive thoughts. And for sure this is left over from the time when we were out on the savannah getting attacked by saber-toothed tigers, and everything we ate could poison us, and it's just all we can do to stay alive. And of course, sometimes it can feel, especially if you watch the news too much, like we still live in a situation like that, but we don't. Most of the things that happen to us are good. We're not likely to walk out the door and just get killed like that. So we live in a situation where we can kind of relax a little bit. We don't have to be so focused on the negative and the threats. And yet, we are left with this vestige of our former selves where we really are very, very fine-tuned to recognize all of the negative things that could be happening. So what do we do with that? One of the things we can do is simply practice, shifting the mindset to something else. And it's definitely been shown that the thoughts that we have more often, those connections wire more strongly in our minds, and then those become the more natural thoughts that we have. So if you practice having a certain thought, it's more likely to just come up naturally in the course of your day. And so on a very simple brute force level, we are okay, I recognize I have a negative thought. I'm not trying to get rid of negative thoughts, because then you would just walk out into traffic and that'd be the end of it. But you're trying to get some kind of a balance. And this is really what our practice and what meditation is about. We're not trying to permanently shut off the brain when we meditate. We're trying to get some balance where we can have some peace, where we can have some quiet. And my Sifu likes to describe it like it's a TV, and if you don't have a power button on the remote and the TV is just constantly on, and it's probably louder than you want it to be, then that is very annoying. The TV, it would not take long for you to just smash it to bits. And if we have the ability, just like the power button on the TV, to quiet the mind, that's great. We have the ability to do that. And then you get to choose to do it however you want to. Some people love to sit in front of the TV and just let it wash over you. And some people love to just be in lots of thoughts and kind of have that constant, whether it's entertaining or painful kinds of thoughts that we have. That's fine, that's your choice. But you want to be able to choose. And so in the same way, my Sifu, I think the first talk that he gave that I ever listened to was choosing happiness. And he just says, happiness is a choice. And when I heard that, I was 17 years old, and I thought, nonsense. Happiness is a choice. Impossible. I know better than this man. So what he's talking about is not our general experience of happiness, which is that it's not a choice. It's like when good things happen to me, I become happy. It's an accident. And that is most of our experience with our emotions and our thoughts. Something happens to us and we have the thought about it, right? These thoughts are kind of automatic. And that is the way that it's going to be unless you choose to practice another way. So in class, we're practicing throwing a punch, and if you constantly throw a punch with your thumb inside, that's going to be the way that you do it. Somebody goes to attack you someday and you're like, I know what to do, and you break your thumb at the first punch. In the same way that we practice putting the thumb where we want it to be, when we practice having our mind be in a certain state, that's what it's just going to naturally kind of go back to. And this is simply, on one level, what we're trying to do is we are creating these mental habits. So we can choose to be happy, by practicing happy thoughts. We can choose to be focused and present by practicing that presence. And this is what's happening in meditation, right? We're practicing coming back to the breath. I heard somebody describe enlightenment as basically letting go of the habit of ego identification. So we have this habit of always identifying with the ego, right? I look in the mirror and I think that's me, and I'm these thoughts, and I'm these, desires and all of that, and that's identifying as the ego. On some level, while it is an incredibly hard habit to break, it's a habit. It's all of these habitual thoughts that we have been having for a very long time. And so we can choose to break that habit by replacing it with something else. So when we meditate, again, on a very basic level, when we just practice going back to the breath, we set aside this time where we are kind of rewiring our minds, and then we encounter a stressful situation. It makes it more likely that we can return to the breath and be in the present, be calm. We practice when we have this negative thought. We practice by deciding, like, this is something that I need to deal with, so I'm going to deal with it, but I'm going to deal with it later. Right now, I don't want to have this stressful kind of mindset, so I'm going to let this go and think about something else. So I asked the kids about this. When I asked the kids, I don't know how kids are these days, but when I was a kid, I did not like eating broccoli. And so broccoli is always the example that I use with the kids. I say, if you have a negative thought, I don't want to eat this broccoli. So what are the positive thoughts that you could practice having? And one of the kids is like, say, I don't hate broccoli. That's still kind of a negative thought. You can't really necessarily trick yourself that way. You're more likely to be successful if you say, I love broccoli, but then probably some part of you is going to think, it's a lie. I still hate broccoli. You could instead kind of shift it to sounding something more like, while I don't love broccoli, I know that it makes me strong and healthy. And so that's what the next kid said. Broccoli makes me grow up strong. Absolutely. The third kid was like, the thought had nothing to do with broccoli. It's like, I love ice cream. Sure, you can think of that too. You can choose whatever you're kind of refocusing to. So I like to, when I'm doing this drill, and I kind of set aside 1 week each year to do it, like we do with the challenge, I'm recognizing a negative thought. I try to find the silver lining with this. And this is on another level. Instead of choosing happiness, it's like I'm choosing this thing, I'm choosing this scenario or this thought or this whatever, because that kind of gives us a sense of power. And this is a very different experience from, I have this thought that I don't really want to be having right now, and so I fight against it, I resist it. As they say, what we resist persists. We give it power when we resist against it. It feels like it has more of an effect on us. Versus, I'm having this thought, and I'm choosing it. I kind of like absorb it, like the broccoli. I absorb it into my being, and it makes me stronger. This is like what the author of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, Shunryu Suzuki, talks about, the mind weed. The mind weed is a little bit easier to understand than the broccoli, but it's the same idea. It's like we have this thought that keeps coming up, and instead of trying to like fight against the weed and we cut off the leaves and throw it away, the leaves still grow back again from the weed. That's how weeds work. But he says what you can do is you can bury the weed and then get sustenance from it. We are kind of accepting in the thought and choosing it. Now that's different from, some of you are like, well then I'm just going to sit here and meditate and just enjoy all the thoughts that I'm having. Now there is a style of meditation. You can just sit there and watch your thoughts, and instead of trying to even let them go, you just observe them. And what's really brilliant about that is you start to recognize, as you are observing the thoughts, you realize that, well, if I'm observing the thoughts, that means that those thoughts are not me. It's like there's a separate observer. And so you can start to have that really nice experience where you realize that these thoughts are not really that important. They don't really have that much to them. And so then they'll kind of disappear on their own, and then you'll just naturally find yourself in this nice, calm, relaxed state, close to nothing. But if that's not working for you, then you're having this thought. It's a persistent thought. It's a weed. It's that broccoli that keeps showing up on your plate. You can just swallow it up, invite it in, and get strength from it. So when you're sitting to meditate, rather than having this thought and you say, like, this is a bad thought. Really, oftentimes what we think anytime in meditation, we think any thought is a bad thought because we're not supposed to be thinking, we're supposed to be meditating. But instead of thinking of it in that way, it's like, okay, this thought is here to teach me. This thought is here to give me strength. When I invite it in, when I swallow it up, then it gives me strength for the remainder of this meditation or for the next meditation. And so this is really kind of what is behind this idea on a deeper level of recognizing the negative thoughts. Really, the thought is negative because that's the spin that we put on it. We can decide this thought isn't positive or negative, it's just thoughts, and so I can just be present with it. And then find that this thought, even if it just keeps coming back over and over again, first of all, that means that it's probably something I need to deal with, but also this persistent thought, like a weed, is something to give me strength. And when you think of it in that way, it kind of stops, again, having power over you. It doesn't feel like something you need to resist. It's just something that you invite in to give you strength. So we'll meditate, and when you do today, try to refrain from judging the thoughts, right? It's going to be very likely now that we've spent the whole time choosing happiness and letting go of negative thoughts and all that stuff. But when you recognize the thought, just label it as thought. And in that moment, you can let it go. You can choose to redirect your mind to something else, or you can just choose to be, and the thoughts will just kind of come in and go out at their own pace, and then that will feel very nice and relaxing. Sit comfortably. So you can sit however you want. I suggest you sit with your back straight, because otherwise you will be in pain and your legs will fall asleep. I like to sit seiza, but sitting cross-legged is perfectly good too, as long as your knees are not pointing up too high. So the hands are upturned. You can have them separate or together. Your back is straight with the shoulders rolled back. Close eyes. So in this style of meditation, our eyes are slightly raised up. You can think of this as the point between the eyebrows, the third eye. If you find that your eyes are crossed, especially if you're starting to get a headache during meditation, your eyes are probably in the wrong position. So you can just imagine that you're looking out at the spot in the distance that's a little bit above your own head, and that will help your eyes naturally raise up. And that's the kind of relaxed position that you want. Your spine is straight but relaxed. Your eyes are up but relaxed. From here, we'll take a couple of deep breaths together. Start with all the breath out, breathing in through the nose. Hold it for a few seconds at the top. And out. In. Hold. Out. In. Hold. Out. Two more, a little bit deeper breath. Make sure you're holding it without much tension. Release. Last one. And go ahead and finish with a double exhale. And just let your breath come in And let your breath go out. So again, you're like an outside observer just watching the breath. When a thought enters, you can just watch the thought, again, like an outside observer without placing any importance, without getting attached. Use your breath as the anchor, keeps you present in this moment. When the thought enters, you can just label it as thought and let it go by focusing back on the breath. If you notice that you're really struggling to keep that attention on the breath, you can go back to counting your breaths. Have 6 deep breaths or 10 deep breaths, and then just relax again to observe the breath.